Hi everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. How's everyone doing? Let's get started in 1 minute as usual, and feel free to start asking questions in the chat or comments. Right, so let's get started. So no questions so far, so I can just talk about something I recently posted about, and that is what is considered a high quality speaking opportunity. Now, just to give everyone a sense of what speaking is about for EB-1A, for NIW, for O1. For EB-1A, speaking, especially in front of very top professionals in your field, can be a great way to strengthen the final merits of your profile and can also help with the other criteria. So for a critical role, for example, if you have been selected to speak at a top conference about the work that you've done for your company and the significant outcomes you have created for your company, that can help reinforce your critical role claim and can also help with final merits, because assuming that it's a top conference for top professionals in your field and you're speaking in front of an audience of, say, executives or just senior professionals in general within your field, that could count as evidence that you have risen to the top of your field. So while speaking isn't really a criterion in itself, it can fit into the other criteria and help with final merits. Now, going back to what I posted earlier about indicators of a high quality speaking opportunity. So the general ones to consider are who is going to be attending the event or conference, who's going to be involved in that opportunity. And that could be speakers, the organizers, or the top professionals in your field. You also want to look at whether a top organization is involved in some way in organizing the event or conference, the speaking opportunity itself. You also want to look at the selection process for the speaking opportunity and whether it was a strict process, it was a rigorous process where you had to go through multiple rounds of review, whether there was a specific criteria that mentions that the conference was only looking for top professionals in your field and then selected you because of certain qualities you had, certain experiences you were able to show through your past work. So those are just 3 factors to consider. Outside of that, probably the topics covered in the conference and the level of complexity of these topics and whether the topics covered were at a very high level. That could in itself also be evidence that you are doing activities that show that you've risen to the top of your field, because by speaking at a conference for very experienced experts in your field, you probably would have to be an experienced expert as well to speak in front of that kind of audience. Number of attendees could also be an indicator, but it's not as important as the types of professionals who are attending the conference or event. So those are just some indicators to look at when thinking about whether a speaking opportunity is considered high quality. Now, just looking at the opposites of these traits, that's where you may be able to spot if an opportunity is low quality. So, for example, not like low quality, but in the sense that perhaps the speaking opportunity might not be something you want to do. It depends on what stage of profile building you're in. If you're a junior professional or mid-level professional, you probably want to be doing as many activities as possible just to get involved in your field and start preparing yourself for some of those more prestigious high quality opportunities. But if you're, say, about to apply for EB-1A, then you probably want to be targeting more high quality opportunities that can be used as evidence that you've risen to the top of your field. Whereas if it's just an opportunity that anyone could get access to, that really has no selection criteria, that has an audience that isn't really top professionals in your field, perhaps that's not something you want to look into if you are about to finalize your profile and then apply. But it depends, of course, on the stage of profile building. And generally, you want to be targeting higher quality opportunities, speaking opportunities, any kinds of opportunities that can be used as evidence that you've risen to the top of your field, because if you're about to finalize your profile, you probably have strong evidence for three criteria, and you at least three criteria, and you aren't really looking to add more criteria, at which point you should probably be focusing on final merits, and that's when you want to be focusing on high quality opportunities that show that you've risen to the top of your field. But no questions so far. So I'll just take this as an opportunity to just briefly share a bit more about my newsletter, which is currently $12 per month. As part of the paid newsletter that I'm currently running, you'll get access to a profile building opportunities database. These are just opportunities to give you an idea of how to get started with EB-1A profile building, or NIW profile building, or O1 profile building. So these are just categorized by field. So as you can see, there are a bunch of fields down here, and then where I've listed a bunch of opportunities, categorized them by criteria as well. And these are just meant as starting points for your profile building, and to give you a sense of what kinds of opportunities you could potentially look into to try to work towards some of the EB-1A criteria, or for the O1 criteria, or to create strong evidence that you are working towards your proposed endeavor in the case of NIW. So that's my profile building opportunities database, which you will get access to as part of my newsletter. You will also get access to AO decision reviews. So this is just an example. These are decisions that go into USCIS's reasoning for initially denying an EB-1A petition, or NIW petition, or O1 petition. And from these decisions, I share profile building insights. And these just give you a glimpse, and these decisions just give you a glimpse into how USCIS thinks about EB-1A, about NIW, EB-2 NIW, about O1. So I share a bunch of these decisions in my newsletter resources as well. And then I also do recorded conversations with EB-1A recipients. And then I share them within the video resources as part of my newsletter. And I'm also starting to upload the recordings of these office hours, these EB-1A profile building office hours, to the video resources. And then outside of these resources, I also run a private group within my newsletter where people are actively sharing opportunities with each other. And I've been seeing people share that they've been landing speaking opportunities, have been getting peer review opportunities, and are then sharing them with the group, have been getting to judge hackathons. And there's just a lot of interaction happening within that group. And that's something you want to look into if you're profile building. Find other people who are in your field who are profile building as well. And that's something that seems to have been happening within the group. That can really help with profile building, because you can discover more opportunities, and you can also give feedback to each other, to people who you're profile building with, and evaluate opportunities together. So you will also get access to my private group, which can help you discover more opportunities, can help you get feedback on your profile from other profile builders, and you also get feedback from me, and I'll be able to ask questions. So that's what you can get. So that's my private group as well, which you get access to as part of my newsletter. And then I also run a contacts database. These are just people I've personally spoken to. And these are, for example, universities, or hackathon organizers, or event organizers, conference organizers, people you can just reach out to and mention my name and immediately start a conversation and use that conversation as a way to land some opportunities. So recently, a bunch of people within my newsletter attended a university event where they got to judge the work of research faculty. And that was an opportunity that came from people reaching out to a contact I had established a couple months back. And as a result of that contact, a lot of them were able to get this judging opportunity with university. So that's just to give you a sense of what these other resources are about. Khalil's question, hi Jason, on H-1B my labor is filed under SOC 15.1252.00 title software developer, but at work my title is lead data engineer for high salary. Which should I use? So I don't have enough background knowledge about this specific question, but from what I've seen, I think this is something you should definitely ask a lawyer. Generally, probably software developer, but you should definitely speak to a lawyer. It's usually 90th percentile Bureau of Labor Statistics, and different lawyers seem to have different ways to argue high salary. But the one I'm familiar with, the method I'm familiar with is arguing on the basis of base salary in the 90th percentile for your state. And if you're a software engineer, probably software developer is the occupation you want to use. And I looked at the Bureau of Statistics. I don't really see anything specifically corresponding to lead data engineer, but I may be wrong and may need to look at those job titles again that are covered. But yeah, definitely speak to a lawyer about this. Anyone else have questions? Any questions? I can also talk about the importance of starting conversations when you are profile building. I think I've spoken about this many times now at this point, but it's something that you will just need to keep doing if you want to keep uncovering new profile building opportunities. You're going to have to get comfortable with starting conversations with professionals you have never met, especially industry experts, some of the very top professionals in your field. It's something you're going to have to get used to. And how you start these conversations is you reach out, possibly mention something you noticed about their background, or possibly mention something you have in common with these people. And then from there, try to start a conversation, say if it's on LinkedIn, assuming they accept your connection request. That could be a great way to start a conversation. Maybe continue on from something you noticed about their background or something that you have in common with them. And then from there, use that as a way to continue the conversation. And you can search for specific people as well on LinkedIn. So say you want to look for someone who also attended your alma mater or is currently attending your alma mater and is a peer reviewer. You would use terms like peer reviewer in your search query or reviewer, and then filter by your alma mater, and then use that as a way to find people who have something in common with you who are doing the kinds of activities you want to be doing, in this case, peer reviewing. Roger asks for judging criteria. Does university level hackathon judging qualify for this criteria? Generally, no, unless the hackathon is open to both students and industry professionals. If it's just students, it's hard to make the argument that students are also considered professionals in your field. They're generally not. Probably depends on the officer too. Some people might just gloss over this, but generally speaking, you might want to be judging the work of industry professionals in your field. And that's why hackathons can sometimes not be as great of opportunities for judging. Peer reviewing is generally something that is considered stronger judging evidence, or judging awards, or judging or reviewing like articles for trade publications or professional publications. Roger asks, does IEEE conference publication in collaboration with professor in India eligible for publishing criteria? If you're referring to authorship, plain language, yes. Really depends. Now, whether this is considered strong evidence would depend on whether this publication in some way highlights that you have risen to the top of your field or contributes to any of your foundational criterion or criteria, which could be leading a critical role or original contributions or both. If you're an academic, then you definitely want to be targeting authorship and providing very strong evidence of authorship. And if this professor in India is really well known, then perhaps that could count as strong evidence because you are publishing, you have published with someone who is considered a very well-known professor in their field. So therefore a top professional in your field, and by collaborating with a very top professional in your field, you can then show that you've risen to the top of your field. That could be part of the argument. So there are a lot of contextual factors to consider. Generally speaking, publishing in an IEEE conference can be considered as decent evidence for authorship, but it all depends on the quality of the publication as well. So it also depends on whether authorship is foundational to your case or it's just something you're trying to check off, which could actually be more of the case for industry professionals. Definitely that's less so for academics because of the importance of authorship for academia-focused profiles. Anyone else have questions? Any more questions? Feel free to ask in the chat. Something else I'm starting to notice is that people are, for some reason, going for membership when membership isn't really that straightforward of a criterion. There seems to be this assumption that membership, because it sounds simple, I just have to be a member of an organization, it's automatically a criterion you should be targeting. But realistically, judging authorship are the more straightforward criteria to target, assuming you have an anchor criterion, so leading a critical role, original contributions, or both, and perhaps are able to meet high salary, then you may want to work towards membership. You can work towards membership, but it's not a straightforward criterion. Like being an IEEE senior member is not strong evidence for membership. Even certain fellowships aren't. Maybe IEEE fellowship, but say some of the fellowships that people will talk about, like IET or IETE, or throughs or BCS, you can have those fellowships and still get denied on this criterion. Not saying you shouldn't work towards these kinds of memberships as a way to meet more top professionals, as a way to find more profile building opportunities. But outside of that, these memberships, they're not going to automatically get you the membership criterion. So stop thinking that membership is just this straightforward criterion that you're just going to meet by ticking off like these common fellowships. It's more difficult to meet than that. What are the best info asks, what are the most 3 criteria for EB-1A? I guess most common are probably, I've heard judging an author outside of the usual ones like leading a critical role, original contributions, and high, I guess you could say high salary is something that people try to go for, judging and authorship. Yeah, I'm not completely sure about this. You would have to ask a lawyer. But I don't see lead data engineer as a pure labor statistics job title. His role definition is critical on building profile for EB-1A. So critical as in, it's more about the work you've done and whether it can be seen as significant and contributing to some significant outcomes that your company has produced. So say your company has generated millions in revenue through some project. For your claim to be considered a strong claim for critical role, you would probably have to show that your work was critical in the production of this project, resulting in the outcomes. So that's one way to define critical role. Savitha asks, does your newsletter cover individuals or opportunities specifically within the semiconductor field, or is it more focused on other industries? I do cover semiconductors, and there are quite a few semiconductor professionals in the private group. I think I know a couple of them. I've spoken to them. So yeah, you can try to find them by introducing yourself in the private group, or I can just tag some of them. And yeah, I do cover this field. I know at least one person I can introduce to you within the private group, at least one person. Follow up for industry folks, should we focus on authorship or any other criteria? Can we use authorship as some argument for final determination? Yes, if the authorship evidence you present shows that you've risen to the top of your field, it could help with final merits. This is quite rare for industry professionals, given that public publishing papers is not really a focus for industry professionals. For industry professionals, most of them focus on judging and authorship at a plain language level, as in they just do some judging, they do some authorship, and then they just check off these two as two additional criteria in addition to an anchor criterion, so leading a critical role, original contributions, or both, and high salary. And then most of them just focus on judging and authorship on a plain language level and don't really rely on them for final merits. Savitha asks, are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that applicants often make when building profiles for these visa types? For EB-1A, the most common mistake I see is doing as many activities as possible without regard for quality, even when you're a senior professional and should really be focusing on high quality opportunities. What I'm seeing is a lot of senior professionals who have leading a critical role and high salary, or original contributions leading a critical role and high salary, focusing on very low quality opportunities that could lead to questions from an officer, to a point where sometimes these opportunities look manufactured, like they paid someone to create these opportunities for them. That's a common mistake, and that is something you should absolutely avoid, because worst case scenario is you get flagged by an officer for pursuing sketchy opportunities, which would just damage your entire profile and what just doesn't really make sense. If you've already risen to the top of your field, you don't need to be pursuing these sketchy opportunities. For NIW, EB2 NIW, it's usually not having a proposed endeavor, or having a proposed endeavor that is focused on having an impact on their current employer and not really in the field, thinking that having an impact on their employer and then indirectly on the field is good enough. Usually that kind of proposed endeavor gets questioned. So really think about your proposed endeavor. Sometimes people don't even have a proposed endeavor and they start profile building, so don't do that, because then your profile building becomes very unfocused. O1, I have less, I don't see as much O1 profile building, maybe that's just me, but from the people I've seen, the standards are generally lower. But I think for O1, it just seems like because people aren't too familiar with profile building in general, it's like a completely novel concept. They again just try to target like very low quality opportunities, when in fact you still need to show that you've risen to the top of your field, just not the top like couple percent or so, more so like top 20% or 30%. That's something that people usually mention for O1. Roger asks, can you share more about membership criteria? Voucher is not very promising for membership criteria. What other memberships should help us strengthen this criteria? I think the point I was trying to make is that you don't need this criterion. So I don't understand why people are trying to go for like the memberships that will count. The point I was trying to make is it's difficult to meet. So no one really knows outside of the typical ones like IEEE Fellow, or maybe like ACM Fellow, or maybe like a very prestigious board position or advisory position, it's hard to mention specific memberships because even if you have those memberships, you can still get questioned for the membership criterion, which leads to my point about how membership is not as straightforward as you think it is. So for some of you, don't bank on meeting membership, but still work towards it, because working towards membership can be a way to strengthen other parts of your profile. I have a PhD working in industry as a senior software engineer. How many criteria I need to meet the requirements? You need a minimum of 3 criteria, and then you need to pass final merits. I am a PhD and working in top US company as a senior software engineer. How many criteria I should meet? Minimum of 3. Try to work towards 4 to 5 if you can, and then work on evidence that will help you pass final merits. So anything that shows that you've risen to the top of your field. You can completely rely on your anchor criterion and perhaps even high salary as a way to claim that you have risen to the top of your field. But generally look for other prestigious opportunities, like prestigious speaking opportunities or board positions or advisory positions, or even getting like media coverage. Those could be ways to strengthen the final merits of your profile. Anyone else have questions? All right, I don't see any other questions. So if you have additional questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will reply. Thanks again, everyone, for joining the live stream.